Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second Mosaic coffee break with Sarah Keegan from the CS Partnership. In our last edition, Sarah entertained us for 10 minutes or so on change management, a subject that the four of us know reasonably well, although Sarah gave us some really good insights into it. In today's session, Sarah's going to talk to us about a subject where I think the four of us would confess that we're at beginner's level, even if a couple of us are lawyers and think we know everything. So this afternoon, Sarah, what we'd like you to talk to us about is that drive for efficiency that's very much on trend with law firms, not before time. So process engineering, process improvement. Is this something you came to through your background in private practice? And what are you doing with law firms in that area now?
It is. I always tell I always tell the people that I'm about to speak to in any firm, any department, any board, exactly how I've managed to mess up, to give them that pure satisfaction, or the comfort rather, that actually they're not meeting a consultant who says, here's something they're not meeting that. They're meeting people who get it, who get where they are. And the reason that my business partner and I ever started this is because we built it up to run 4,000 transactions a month in our property department, which is, according to at the time, in fact still is, one of the top 3 biggest departments of submitters to the land registry. But as you can imagine, that meant that a lot of things went wrong. And a lot of things, we weren't just doing 40, we were doing 4,000. And it just impacts how many things can possibly go wrong, and therefore how many times I was sitting talking to the people who were about to write reports to the insurers, you name it. It was just, fixing problems all of the time. So for example, if the wrong mortgage had been redeemed, we would then work out how to put checks and balances into our what we would now call process maps to make sure that that didn't happen again. And that somebody had to answer 2 questions, or perhaps somebody from accounts would have also had then a sign off. And all of it sounds incredibly basic, but we would sit there with not any previous experience on how to process map and think, how can we make sure that never happens again? And we had the pleasure, I suppose, is the wrong way of saying this, of 4,000 transactions a month, and therefore different problems that we would never have been able to look at and think of if we'd started from the beginning of how do we write a good process. So when we sit with people, the first thing we'll say to them is that story about, we've made all the mistakes anybody in this room could make, and then some. But tell me what you do on a daily business. Tell me what you do. Tell me what you do every day, day in, day out. What do you repeatedly find yourself doing that you wish you weren't doing? And you'll get a lot of people saying nothing. Everything I do is fine. So we'll give them some examples. How many times do you input the data when you're opening a file? Oh my God, that's a big thing, 3 times. So, and then they start. And then, like we were just talking about previously as well, the minute somebody starts, other people pile on. Well, if that's the thing we're allowed to say, this drives me mad. And this drives me mad. And
it's interesting that you came at it from a department that was doing 4,000 transactions a month. The scope for efficiency improvement in something with that kind of volume is massive. One of the things that I've always struggled with is working mainly in the environment of the sort of 2 to 10 million pound turnover firm. Yeah. Is having the critical mass of any one process that makes the return on investment worthwhile. How big does a department or a process or a section have to be to make it worthwhile going through the exercise in the depth that you go through it? Because process mapping is not a quick and easy task.
It's not, and it's a really good question. To my mind, and I would say this, I guess I'm in the right job for this, the problem is why law firms haven't yet adopted those processes and changes, because of your point there, Barry. In as much as you can make those changes and improvements to your bottom line instantaneously with this work, and it's worth it whether you're doing what were we doing, £4 million a year or £100,000 a year. Why wouldn't you do that? You would automatically say, I'm not anymore chained to a telephone in my front hall where people can get hold of me. I'm now carrying my phone around. It's the same process of looking at something and saying, the way that we're delivering this is archaic. asking your clients to, for example, I'm going to send you out a letter. It's my terms of engagement. I want you to sign it and then go to the post office and send it back to me is archaic because everybody's moved on from that. So whereas beforehand, even up to 5 years ago, it would have been, I don't need to do that. I just do this kind of law. I'm a commercial lawyer. I'm a corporate lawyer. Oh, I'm a corporate lawyer. I don't need to do any of that. Somebody else does my typing for me. Somebody else looks after my files for me. In that sense, it doesn't impact me. In fact, I remember once saying to a big room of corporate lawyers, he said, I don't need any of that. None of that will make any impact on my life. My secretary does it all. And I turned around and said, Maureen, how would it impact your life? And she just started. She was livid. She was absolutely livid with him. But so it can happen. It should happen in every firm. How you onboard, for example, how you bill, how you look at your money, how you're looking at your compliance, how you're looking at your risk, how you're able to then run reports that enable you to easily update your indemnity insurance every year. Any of that is something that it doesn't matter how big you are. In fact, the smaller you are, the more efficient you would like to be, actually, I would say.
Do you know, I thought that was a brilliant question, Barry, and an even better answer, Sarah. I'm going to throw you quite a tough question now, Sarah. How do you measure the improvement in efficiency? How typically would you and the firms you work with go about measuring that improvement?
Well, there's a couple of different clients like different evidence. So so it's easy to run reports, for example, where you could have, and we've done it, half of a department using, say, an onboarding system that's brand new. So by onboarding, I'm saying client comes in, you give them some kind of quotation, no matter how that is, not necessarily conveyancing, but all sorts of different quotations. You deal with it, you've registered their data, you send engagement letters out. Before that, you've done the anti-money laundering, you've done the checks, you've done all of those things that need to happen, and then you get it back in and you're ready to go. And you can analyze that and say, well, I tell you what, these 5 people are going to do it this way and these 5 people are going to do it that way. And the first time we ever did it, we found the engagement letters, for example, coming back within something like 2 to 3 days, usually faster. And the paper ones were, some of them never came back, as you well know, and some of them would take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 15 weeks. So by the time you're looking at that, this is one of those areas that you should never have to worry about again. You've done it, you start, you go, and you run exception reports about what hasn't worked so that you can pick up problems, because it shouldn't be something that clever lawyers ever have to worry about, for example, or clever accountants or clever whoever it is. It's a no-brainer these days to get that sorted. So there's that. But then more than that, you get people who are able to then actually deliver a better service. So they've got more time to be on the phone with their clients. And you can see that in the way that they're using the phones or the way that they are smiling. Sometimes even that's a thing. And you can see that you can run more files through. But nobody's crying. That's another good benchmark of how well it's working. Yeah,
that tells you a lot about law, doesn't it? That you measure success by the number of people crying.
How somebody's not crying, but usually, let's face it, boards like proper figures. So how much has the turnover gone up, and how much has the profit increased? The net proceeds. How much has that increased and not increased? Yes.
Can I throw one at you just as a measure for that, which has always horrified me, and that is the number of input, i.e. payroll hours, that a firm has to put in of all its staff per chargeable hour sold.
Yes.
You know, and it's absolutely staggering when you look at that. Easily, in mid-sized firms, you're looking at 3 to 4 input hours per output hour.
Yeah,
and I guess a lot of what you're doing is engineering out the wastage in the middle.
Yes, and there's some difficulties around that, isn't there? Because 10 to 1, you like your staff, so you don't want anybody to have to leave. That's one. You know, we don't want to change anybody's job because they might have been with you for a good few years, or they might have been very loyal through difficult times. It doesn't matter. You might just like them. Yeah, and there's one lawyer actually put his hand up when we were talking to a room and said, so if I do the things that we're supposed to be doing, then actually that means that, or that we're talking about, then that actually does mean that I would be able to do my work faster. I said, yes. And he said, so would I charge less? And that's another problem. They see that you come into this where you're bringing in improvements, or you're talking about introducing improvements that you know are going to massively shave hours of wasted time away. And then you come across a very human thing of, but I'm busy doing this. And if I'm not busy doing this, either do I have to charge less like that particular gentleman, or what on earth am I going to fill my time with? And the truthful answer is more work, because that's the really hard bit. That's the hard bit of going to find the work. This bit is the easy part, you see.
There is such an obvious link between what you do there and the work I do in pricing.
Yes.
One of the sort of 101 questions I get in pricing is, how many minutes should we put down on our timesheet for using a precedent?
Yes.
To which my answer is none. That's fraud. But what we can do is look at outputs rather than inputs, and look at the value of something delivered. And what you're doing there is helping people deliver something with less cost, less input. Yeah. It shouldn't affect the price.
It shouldn't. Well, in fact, actually, if you do it really well, you could put it, arguably, and I've been trained by you, of course, you should be putting your price up.
Because you're doing it quicker.
Efficient. Because you're doing it faster, because you're able to not waste time. Being busy for busy's sake is something which drives me mad.
And you drive out the non-chargeable time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or you do have decent non-chargeable time where people are actually sitting reading updates in law, for example, or something, or going out for marketing, or whatever it happens to be.
Heaven forbid.
or going home at a reasonable time. Or going home
and not crying, Mark.
Exactly. As I say, I've never actually cried at work.
Time for one last question, anybody?
And I've always found with process improvement is, if you say to a lawyer something could be improved, the interpretation they put on that is that something is wrong and there is somebody to blame. How have you cracked that one?
Pretty easily, actually, because I come at it from how would I like to have somebody tell me that I was doing it possibly not in the correct way. So it's very easy for us to say, you are marvelous in as much as you're sitting in this firm and you have been for so long, and that's great. But one of the drawbacks of that is you haven't seen how everybody else is possibly doing it. You haven't been round the houses, so to speak, and you certainly haven't had the experience that we've got of looking at different products, because if you did, that's a lot of time and effort. And what you're actually sitting there doing is looking after your clients, rightly so. So that's the first thing. But secondly, the pandemic itself helped a lot, because everything just suddenly had to get better and sharper and faster, and everybody literally picked up laptops or bought laptops and moved home, and that therefore then comes into, hang on a second, things have got to change. But more than that, it's I start right at the beginning of the world's changed, and if you come back to say even my own journey of I qualified in 96, trust me, that was in a firm called Cooper Sons, Hartley and Williams, lovely people, but we had one computer on reception, and from time to time the senior partner would come down and see if anybody had emailed us, you know. And that's a change from here to there. Now if you've got your head down and you're functioning and you're working at your desk delivering your service for your clients, you haven't also got time to turn around and wonder how you could do that better, because you're always doing client work. So when you put it like that, it's not anybody's fault, because actually what they're doing is a really good job. What they're just not looking at possibly, and they don't have time to, is how they could do that better. Unless they're like me, who just gets really annoyed with doing it more than once and has to work out how to do it. But that's slightly different. But you see, even then, possibly, we'd never be in this position if we hadn't been running 4,000 transactions a month and thinking, God, there's got to be a better way. Do you see what I mean? Maybe that's the thing. So. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you for
thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. You've taught us a lot in the last 10, 15 minutes or so. I think we've all got clients who don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
And I think we're massively reassured from listening to you that even our small to medium-sized clients should now be looking at process mapping and aiming for efficiencies. It's not too expensive. It's not too difficult. The returns are instantaneous. Yeah. And after all, why wouldn't you want to be more efficient and more profitable. So Sarah, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.